Pork and chicken are not going to kill you. They're not going to hurt you, but some people may be way more sensitive to them. Chickens carry candida. They can pass that to humans.
Chicken was actually fed an arsenic-containing drug.
Rebecca Heischman, a life coach and wellness expert.
She healed over 10 autoimmune diseases with a high-fat carnivore diet, and you can do it too.
I tried carnivore 8 times, and I felt worse each time because of histamine intolerance. During those first couple of months, everyone should be doing high-fat carnivore. Suet, tallow, butter are all going to be really beneficial. You should never go below 1,500 calories. Never. Even if I'm working with a 12-year-old, that's not an option. You need to become fat adapted first, and the only way to do that is to give it enough dietary fat. If you've ever run to the bathroom or if you can't trust your farts, then you're probably eating too much rendered fat. The more liquid that it is, the more likely it is to give you diarrhea, heart palpitations, nausea, even anxiety. People are maybe pouring the grease back over their ground beef after cooking it. These fatty lattes are full of rendered fat.
Sodium increasing blood pressure and causing a heart attack. True or false?
Completely false. There's no danger of too much sodium or anything like that when you're not including carbs or sugar. If you're constantly constipated, you may just need more electrolytes. I'm not demonizing bacon, but I do think that there are better sources of fat. I mean, I've had this conversation with Dr. Barry standing in front of me. Let's use stearic acid, which is amazing for your mitochondria.
Chicken wings. Do you recommend chicken wings?
No.
In this episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Rebecca. She has healed over 10 autoimmune conditions with a high-fat carnivore diet. And if you need more support on carnivore, I would love to invite you to join the Go Carnivore community. Every week we have new meal plans, fat loss challenges, and your favorite carnivore doctors like Dr. Anthony Chafee, Dr. Elizabeth Bride, and Dr. Kilt. So if you'd like to learn more, just go to gocarnivore.com. Over the last 2 years, I've coached around 2,000 people in our Go Carnivore community, and 95% of people doing carnivore for a few months or even a few years, they tell me they're not getting the results that they want. And it's usually very easy tweaks or changes that they need to make. So in today's episode with Rebecca, we're going to talk about the 10 changes that you can easily make to a carnivore diet to get the results that you want. So Rebecca, what is the first thing that might be holding people back?
I think the first thing, Rena, is going to be not getting enough fat or getting more fat. So getting more fat than protein on an all-meat diet can actually take a lot of intentionality. I think that one of the fattiest cuts of beef is ribeye steak, and that's only a 1-to-1 fat to protein ratio. So if we're looking to get more fat than protein, I think being more intentional about fatty lamb or adding additional fats to your meals like suet, tallow, butter are all going to be really beneficial.
So why is fat so important, especially when you're new to carnivore or you're transitioning to carnivore?
That fat, first of all, is the precursor to all of your sex hormones. So for anyone who's trying to heal hormonally, that fat is the foundation of it. If you want to thrive with your testosterone as a man or your, sex hormones as a female, you need that saturated fat. And we see this time and time again. I work with some women who are super ripped. They have a six-pack, but they have hormonal acne. They're hangry all the time because they're not eating enough fat. So it's just not sustainable to not eat the saturated fat, especially when you cut out carbohydrates. So if you're cutting out carbs, which are a fuel source, but you're not getting enough fat, you're basically holding yourself in a purgatory of energy. You need an energy source. Even for people who are overweight and have extra fat on their bodies, you need to become fat adapted first. Your body needs to learn how to tap into that fuel, into that body fat. And the only way to do that is to give it enough dietary fat. So I would say, especially during the transition or during those first couple of months, I would say everyone should be doing high fat carnivore.
Let's kind of spell out what is high fat carnivore, because that's very varied in terms of the amount of fat that people need. I know for you that you're dealing with over 10 autoimmune conditions. Prior to going carnivore, doctors couldn't help you. Can you elaborate more on that and how you came up with your fat to protein ratio?
Yeah, so I struggled with my health for years until I entered the carnivore diet. But I had used a ketogenic approach for many years prior to carnivore to offset the symptoms that I was dealing with. I was bedbound at one point with chronic Lyme disease. That's when I started working with functional medicine doctors and uncovered all of these autoimmune diseases. And they were severe. I had crest scleroderma, which was rapidly increasing. I had fibromyalgia, Raynaud's, Hashimoto's, Addison's. ulcerative colitis near the end there. And so the high fat approach is so therapeutic and so anti-inflammatory. So I began with it for the non-epileptic seizures that I was dealing with. So it wasn't epilepsy, but I was having auras basically. And I believe this was due to the chronic Lyme. And I was bedbound. I couldn't drive. And so a very, very strict high fat ketogenic diet allowed me to no longer be bedbound. I was still struggling a lot, but I knew that made a huge difference. And so when I entered carnivore, discovered the non-aged meats, and finally transitioned into carnivore, I knew I still wanted that really high fat, but no longer was I using coconut oil or MCT oil to get it up there. So that was a big switch for me, to switch from plant fats to animal fats. And so suet is one of the main fats that I used. I had a lot of diarrhea and issues with that. So suet was my main fat. I did not do well with butter for a year and a half into my healing. And so that saturated animal fat was key for me. And as I continued to heal my hormones and get more healthy body fat on my first 69-pound body, once I got up to like 104, I got my period back. I was not craving as much extra fat. And that's when I knew, okay, my body has taken to this. I'm a little bit more supported. I can drop this fat intake down to maybe 2-to-1 instead of 4-to-1. And when I say 2-to-1, I mean grams, not percentages. And this confuses people, but I do want to make it clear because it's really important. And when I say grams, I don't mean weight. I mean macronutrient grams. So if I'm eating 1 gram of protein per pound of desired body weight, say that's 130 for me at 5'7", then I'm going to be eating double that in fat, which would be 260. That's a 2-to-1 fat to protein ratio by my standards anyways. So as I continued to heal, that fat ratio was able to come down very naturally. I never restricted. I never forced it. One day I didn't want the lamb chops, and that's really crazy to me because they're delicious. And so I started eating more veal and goat and leaner cuts. And that's the beauty of leptin, our satiety hormone. You eat the right amount of fat and protein, and your hunger is going to dictate what you eat, which will dictate an optimal weight for your body.
In case you want to, I guess, visualize on a plate what it looks like to have a 2-to-1 fat to protein ratio, or even a 4-to-1 fat to protein ratio. In terms of a plate, what would that look like?
So I want you to visualize a ribeye steak, first of all. You see all that marbling. And I think a lot of people think, oh man, this is so high fat. But again, it's just 1-to-1. And you can see that. You can see the fat is almost equal to the meat. That's 1-to-1. And so if you're struggling to visualize how much fat, how much fat you need looks like, I like to picture a tablespoon of butter, because fat is fat. It's pretty linear in terms of, whatever fat source you're getting, it's going to be around 9 to 10 calories per tablespoon. Not calories, grams of fat per tablespoon. And so if I'm looking at a piece of meat, I just kind of add up the tablespoons of fat, visual fat, to see how much fat is on that. Fat is going to be much more dense in terms of volume. So, you could have a pile of suet this big, and that could be up to 50 grams of fat, which is 500 calories. So it will grow on you. I would say the more that you learn to track, then you will develop the skill of visual. I never would know how to eyeball a piece of meat if I hadn't been tracking for some time. And I know a lot of people are adverse to that, and I understand it can be triggering, but it's a skill. If you can't look at a piece of protein and fat and kind of eyeball and guesstimate how much fat and protein is on your plate, you can only get so far, I think. Then you have to rely solely on intuition. And a lot of people don't have that intuition developed before they've healed their leptin or their other hormones, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I also wanted to point out something else, which I also get in our community. They're doing carnivore, and yes, they've increased the fat, 2-to-1 fat to protein ratio, but they're very stuck on the fact that they're gaining weight. Why am I gaining weight? And this is especially what we see in women. Maybe for men, they might be losing weight. Who knows? Why is that? And what should they do about that?
So women who are gaining weight before they lose it, I think that often comes from, one, it could be someone who is coming from severe caloric restriction. Maybe this person has done Weight Watchers 10 times and the weight keeps coming back. Well, guess what? Now your body doesn't trust you. It's not going to be as easy to lose it. You might notice that it gets harder and harder to lose the weight no matter how much you restrict. I've worked with people who are morbidly obese, eating under 800 calories a day and not losing any weight. So obviously, it's not as simple as calories in, calories out. And so I share that to share that the body has to learn how to trust you again. And in order to do that, you have to give it enough fuel. So if you're cutting out the carbs, you've got to give it enough fat. Otherwise, you're just saying, I'm still restricting. I'm still starving you of nutrients. And it's going to want to hold on to everything that you give it. Whereas if you give it plenty and you support it properly, you are going to upregulate your hormones. Your body will adapt. That's what bodies do. We adapt. And so over time, your thyroid is going to start to upregulate. You're going to start producing more hormones. You're going to feel better. And you're literally raising your resting metabolic rate. But you're also sending the signal to your body that it's in a safe place, that you're not restricting and you're not playing around anymore. You're just supporting it. And when it feels fully supported, it will release extra body fat. That's how it happens. I do think that including carbohydrates makes that more complicated because carbohydrates are hyperpalatable. Our blood sugars start getting wonky. Not impossible to do with carbs, but they do make things much more complicated.
I wanted to also clarify something that you said previously around the types of fat that you were having on a ketogenic diet. You mentioned coconut oil and MCT oil. Why would that coconut oil and MCT oil, which people out there are saying that's so good for you, medium chain triglycerides, it's fantastic. Why might that not be good for somebody who is got chronic autoimmune conditions or metabolic conditions?
That's a great question. And I'll try to condense it because I really geek out when it comes to lipid profile and fats, and you know this. So I'll start out with MCT oil. I think that it can become a crutch. I used it for a long time to get those ketones up because I needed the therapeutic ketones, but it's so easily used for fuel. It can't be stored. And so your body is just like, yeah, I know how to use this. And so if you're only using MCTs or primarily MCTs, your body gets less good at producing ketones from regular dietary fat. And we don't want that. We want nutritional ketosis, which is when your body can use its own body fat. And I think that actually becomes more difficult the more that we rely on things like MCT oils, which are quickly, easily converted. It's like a crutch. And then additionally, coconut oil in general and MCTs contain a compound called salicylate, which I think most people actually are familiar with. It's what is found in face wash. That's what dries out our pimples. You'll see salicylate. And so you can imagine that it could be irritating to someone's gut. I was definitely irritated to it. I didn't realize that until I cut it out, but it can be irritating to the gut. Pure C8 MCT oil does not contain the salicylates. So that's something that I use for baking. If I want to coat a pan with grease, I will use pure C8 MCT oil because it's convenient, but I don't use it as like a primary fat. And then for butter, it does, the difference between butter and coconut oil is that butter contains your vitamins that are found in fat and your other nutrients like conjugated linoleic acid, stearic acid, butyrate. Coconut oil doesn't have that. Coconut oil is just calories. It is saturated fat, but it doesn't have those vitamins. So that's one difference. But even with butter, people who are very severely sensitive, like myself, I will say I was more sensitive than most people. I don't want to scare people away from butter, but I started to get arthritic symptoms after consuming it for more than 3 days at a time. And so I pulled it back out for another 6 months, and then I was fine with it the next time I reintroduced it. But I believe it was due to the small amount of lactose that is found in butter. I didn't do well with ghee either, not to mention it's expensive. So that just wasn't an option for me. So I relied on suet for a long time.
I'm glad that you said that. So during this whole process, this whole episode, it's not about saying that one thing is bad and one thing is good and it's just black and white or all or nothing. It's really about an N=1 experiment. And that's really what Carnivore is. So that's what we're trying to go through, troubleshooting the different things that might not be working for you if you're not getting the results that you want. So let's get to the next thing that we could tweak or change, that is not having enough electrolytes.
Yes. So electrolytes, I think, are totally crucial. I haven't heard of one person that didn't need to at least bump up their sodium when they transitioned from burning glucose to fat burning. And so that swap, what happens is your insulin drops. And that's why we can burn so much more fat. Insulin drops. Insulin is the fat storage hormone. And when it drops, we start letting go of sodium. We don't hold on to it as much. This is why bodybuilders will eat a bunch of carbs right before a show, because their muscles, they soak up that glycogen, that water, and it makes them look plump. It makes them look more buff. But it's not a great thing long term to be carrying all that extra water, and I think inflammation as well. And so that is why you'll want to bump up your electrolytes. You're going to be spilling through sodium when your insulin drops. I think the longer someone is fat adapted and using fat for fuel, those electrolytes will balance out and regulate, and you shouldn't need to add so much extra. But I will say that I am functioning optimally at around 10 grams of sodium per day. That's a lot of sodium. Generally, people fall between 2 and 5 grams of sodium on a low carb diet. I need 10 grams. Now, I am working out regularly. I am doing sauna regularly, but I also think it's just part of who I am. My adrenals have always craved sodium. People don't want to eat my food because it's so salty type thing. And that has improved, with my health improving, but I still stay really salty. So I don't want people to feel like, oh, I shouldn't be relying on electrolytes anymore. That's true in a way, but I also don't think you should beat yourself up if you feel optimal with more. I find that almost all of my clients feel better with more sodium, regardless of where they start. Most people are not getting more than 3 grams a day. Some are getting 5, but I would encourage you, if you're at 5 grams of sodium per day, maybe bump it up slowly just to see if you feel better. You have met your threshold when you either start urinating more frequently or you start getting loose stools. There's no danger. There's no danger of too much sodium or anything like that when you're not including carbs or sugar. So that's the beauty of it. You can play around and see what your tolerance is. But electrolytes are crucial. Our brains run on electromagnetic frequencies. Electrolytes, we need these. I also believe our soil and our water are depleted of minerals. So we need to be replenishing. Not everyone is eating seafood every day to get those minerals. So electrolytes are huge in my book.
So, what does sodium actually do in the body? You mentioned it's very important for the brain, but it's also important for muscle contraction. So, that's why people can get leg cramps or cramping.
Yes, good point. So the leg cramps, muscle contraction, it also plays a huge role in insulin sensitivity. People with blood sugar issues, you may just be dehydrated. I know if I get dehydrated, that's when my blood sugar bumps a little bit. It's like, okay, something's going on. It's essential for your colon cells. If you're constantly constipated, you may just need more electrolytes.
And the other part of the electrolyte equation is potassium, magnesium as well. What is the importance of potassium first for the body, and especially when you transition to carnivore?
I personally see that most people don't need to supplement with potassium. I think that it's more about the ratio and relationship between potassium and sodium. And so if that ratio is correct, kind of like our omega-3s and 6s, that ratio is balanced, then I don't think we have much to worry about. But potassium plays a role in how we hold on to sodium and how we use sodium, and then how we use our muscles as well. So I think that leg cramps could very well be potassium deficiency. That's, I think, one of the main symptoms of potassium deficiency. And then magnesium, same leg cramps. Magnesium relaxes the body, it calms the body, but magnesium also is for our brains. Magnesium 3 and 8 is the only version that crosses a blood-brain barrier. But magnesium in general, I think, is going to help with muscle cramps and just the calmness of your body in general. I think most people are depleted of magnesium because stress depletes magnesium, and we live in a very stressful society. So that's actually one supplement that, if someone's already taking it, I might say you might consider continuing taking that. I'm not a big fan of supplements. I like to use food as medicine, but I think most people could benefit from supplementing magnesium.
I think many people would want to know, well, what is the best supplement to take for magnesium? Do you have a brand that you would recommend that you trust for people to try?
Yeah, I actually love the magnesium spray by Aussie Trace Minerals. The owner, Jay, he's the one that told me that magnesium is best absorbed through our skin. And so I'm a fan of Epsom salt baths, but even a bigger fan of this magnesium spray. I spray it on the bottom of my feet every single night. You can ask my husband. Sometimes he sprays it on my feet for me. And I think it really does help with just recovery, stress levels, deeper sleep, digestion even. And so that's my favorite version. There's another one. It's like a multi-magnesium bio-optimizers. I forget the name of it, but that is also a really good one because it contains every single form of magnesium, which is great. But that's by bio optimizers.
Okay, perfect. So if you're transitioning to carnivore or you don't feel that great on carnivore, headaches, fatigue, leg cramps, you can do the sodium. Is it just salt that we should be using, or do you actually recommend that you have something like Element or good quality salt like Redmond's real salt?
Yeah, you're asking the good questions.
I'm being very specific because I know in the community they're going to wonder. So I go very basic. And if you have more comments, leave them down in the comment section. I always read them so I know in my next interview that I know what to ask. This is why I'm being very specific.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but it puts me on the spot. So I hope I don't make any enemies. But I think that we should use electrolyte supplements in the beginning because so the way that electrolytes work is it's like a pyramid, and at the top is the biggest tank, so to speak. That's sodium. In theory, if you keep your sodium maintained, you keep your sodium tank full, then you shouldn't start tapping into these other minerals on the bottom of the period. But usually, when people transition, at some point, your tank for sodium is going to be depleted. And that's when you start tapping into magnesium, potassium, these other minerals. And once that happens, it can be more difficult to replenish those with just sodium. So if you're getting a high quality salt like Redmond Real Salt, that does contain over 80 trace minerals, I think it is. So that's way better than just your table salt. But I still think it's beneficial to get an electrolyte supplement that has higher amounts of these other minerals so that you can replenish yourself quickly. I would say get some electrolyte supplements. I use Redmond Relight. That's what I'm drinking right now. And it's just a quick way to replenish, especially if you're running into the keto flu or major fatigue. It's just going to be a lifesaver. And not to mention, not everyone likes drinking salty water. So I think in the beginning, I think an electrolyte supplement is really helpful. But if you don't want to spend the money on it, if you're not interested in it, and you want to do just holistic, all natural, another solution could be a Soleil water. That's basically just water that is super saturated and condensed with that sodium. And it's super easy to make. You just fill a mason jar with water and you pour sodium into it until it no longer dissolves. That way, you know it's completely concentrated. And you can take, 2 to 3 tablespoons of that in your regular water throughout the day. I still am a fan of the electrolyte supplements more than that, but I think that's another solution.
As Rebecca mentioned, electrolytes is so important, especially when you're going from eating carbohydrates to not eating carbohydrates. So if you've moved to a carnivore lifestyle and you feel symptoms like headaches, nausea, tiredness, or even leg cramps, you can try to salt your meals and put salt in your water, put lots of salt liberally, especially good quality salt. But if this doesn't work, I would highly recommend leaning on a supplement. And the one that I'd recommend is Element, because Element contains the right amount of sodium, potassium, and magnesium. The great thing about Element, it doesn't have anything nasty. There's no preservatives. There's nothing artificial that's going to affect your carnivore or even keto results. I prefer the raw unflavored option. I like to put that in my morning coffee. I like to put that in my water. My partner loves the chocolate salt option. So you can choose which one you would like. So if you'd like to try Element, you can get a free sample pack on every order. All you have to do is go to drinkelement.com/5-minute body. That's DRINKLMNT.com/5-minute body to get this free sample pack. And thank you so much for Element for sponsoring this video. So if you want to use an electrolyte supplement, how much? I know the Element packs. Is it 1 or 2 packs a day that somebody should be using?
I think that's a good way to start. So typically people are salting their food, I think around 2 grams of salt daily. 1 teaspoon of sodium is 2,300 milligrams, so a little over 2 grams. I think most people are getting around 1 teaspoon of salt on their food. And so I think playing around with 2 packs of electrolytes makes total sense. Redmond is 800 milligrams per scoop. Element is probably 1,000 per pack. Is that correct? Yeah. So they're close to 1 gram per serving. So I would aim for maybe start with 2 servings of an electrolyte supplement. And then with my clients, I will, if they're feeling better from that, then I'll say, why don't this next week you increase by another half scoop or another half pack? Or another half tablespoon of Soleil water. Just keep increasing until you run into excess urination or loose stools, because then you find your threshold. But I think people could benefit from even more than just 2 packs. But I think that's a great place to start.
Okay, last question before we move to thing number 3. sodium increasing blood pressure and causing a heart attack. Can you please explain that for people that might be concerned? And it can be a valid concern because that's what we hear. Is that true or false?
It's completely false. Fun story. I hired a chef for my last retreat. We had like 50 people, and he had been on blood pressure medication his whole life. And he was telling me about it because he's just totally like, he's totally enthused by this group of carnivores and how we're salting everything. He's like, yeah, I'm on blood pressure medication. So he decided to give it a shot. And him and his wife have lost a ton of weight, and he's off his medication. And he's not dealing with high blood pressure. This is someone who's had lifelong blood pressure issues. He's eating more salt than ever. I hear this all the time. So don't blame salt for what the sugar did. All right. That's what's going on. The sugar is causing hyperinsulinemia, and then we're not utilizing sodium efficiently. Same as cholesterol. Don't blame the fat for what the sugar did. So salt actually, I think, helps us with our blood pressure. It helps to regulate it, helps to support our adrenals, which plays into our stress. Salt is amazing. There's nothing wrong with it.
Good. Okay, let's go to the next one. Thing number 3, which is not eating enough food in general.
Yeah, I think that this happens with a lot of people that I work with. It's like I think their lifelong issues have been coming from lifelong undereating. It does happen from time to time. I see, this is another value of tracking is you can measure what you can manage, or you can manage what you can measure. And I think that some people are just unaware, especially when you start eating only meat, which is protein dense, and protein is the most satiating macronutrient. So people eat, one steak and they're like, man, I'm stuffed. I'm good for the day. Well, you probably are only eating 750, 800 calories. And that's not enough. And so that can cause a lot of adrenal issues, thyroid issues. Your hair could be falling out, nail issues, fatigue for sure, irritability, insomnia. I know for me, the first night at my retreats it's very chaotic. So everyone's arriving. I'm walking everyone to their bedroom, meeting and greeting all these people I've never met before. It's a lot of details, not to mention unpacking 10,000 pounds of meat. It's a lot. And so that night I struggle to eat enough. I'm just go, 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 go until I hit the sack. Many times I have not slept that first night because I underate. And I always remember, oh, shoot, I didn't eat enough. And my body wakes me up and it's like, I'm not happy. I'm not going to sleep. I'm not comfortable. I'm not taken care of. So I always aim to eat enough the next day, and then I sleep like a baby. And so that's always a reminder to me that a lot of people are struggling because they're not eating enough. Your body is too smart for you to get away with that. And so you're going to deal with it in one way or another. So it's really important to eat enough, especially when you're going carnivore, again, because it's all about nourishing your body and sending that signal that it is properly supported. And that will never happen if you're under eating.
Do you suggest that people have a calorie target? How do you know if you're eating enough?
I should never say never, but I rarely talk about calories, and I definitely don't set calorie goals. The only thing I'll say to a client is you should never go below 1,500 calories. Never. Even if I'm working with a 12-year-old, that's not an option. So I don't really talk about calorie goals, but I will talk about specific fat and protein goals. And those equate to an adequate, appropriate amount of calories or energy for that person. And that will change as they continue to heal and their hormones demand more or demand less, depending on if they've gained weight or lost weight. And so I just focus on the fat to protein ratio. And also when their intuition starts to develop, you can trust that. When you start resistance training for the first time in 10 years, you're probably going to crave more protein. And I would encourage you to consume more protein. If you start doing, 3 miles of cardio every day out of the blue, you might crave more fat. I would encourage you to eat more fat. So it's a balance of listening to the body and trusting that your body knows what it needs, especially when you're removing hyperpalatable foods like carbohydrates.
So you mentioned that we have to look at protein and fat. What is a baseline that most people need to eat for protein in terms of a number? And then we can look at what foods might be making up that number.
Sure. I personally believe 1 gram of protein per pound of desired body weight is optimal. A lot of people believe lower is optimal. I am not a fan of these 60 to 80 grams of protein per day diets. I don't think it's sustainable, especially as women and men grow older. We need more protein to protect our bones, our lean muscle mass. It's only beneficial. So 1 gram per pound of desired body weight is my recommendation. And that's what I live by for sure.
And what does that look like on a plate? If you were to visualize, like for you, what number would that be for you per day?
Around 140. Right now, I'm bouncing back from giving birth. I did lose most of that weight, but not all of it. And I think part of that is just I'm breastfeeding. My prolactin levels are up. I think my body wants to maintain a certain weight. And so I'm trying to honor that. So 140 feels very healthy for me right now, especially because I know I have gained muscle and I want to maintain that. So that would look like, so not that it's a superfood, but I like to eat turkey bacon because I don't like the fat in turkey, but it tastes really good. I don't like the fat in pork. We've talked about that. So I go for turkey bacon sometimes. It's 60 grams of protein per 10 slices. I can eat 10 slices of bacon easily. So that is what I'll have for breakfast many days. I eat my turkey bacon. I'm down 60 grams of protein easy. And then for dinner, I might have bison, elk. I eat a lot of bison and elk these days. Salmon, when it's on sale, I'll get some salmon at Whole Foods maybe. Whole Paycheck Foods. And then there are some days that I crave more fat as well. So I'll be eating more lamb chops or lamb loins, or I'll have lamb bacon for breakfast instead of the turkey bacon. So that does alternate high fat, lower fat for me right now, just in this season. I really listen to my body there. I have been eating more dairy than I have in the past. I don't eat cheese, but I eat a lot of cottage cheese. I don't know why I've been craving it a lot for the past year or so. It's an easy way for me to get more protein. So I'll have maybe a cup of that with some frozen berries, a very minimal amount of berries. I'm not like overeating carbs here, but that is what it looks like for me these days. And before, it would have looked like a lot of fatty lamb with suet on the side and maybe some shrimp as some variety. And then eventually when I reintroduced eggs, I would make lots of things out of eggs, whether that be waffles or my carnivore brownies. That's a great way to get protein up if I'm struggling to eat enough meat. So yeah, it definitely evolves over time, but we have a lot of options in the animal kingdom.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important to know how much protein is in different foods, because once you know that, then you can play around and know what you like and what you can then eat to hit your protein target. When you eat enough protein, even I eat 130 to 140 grams a day, you feel so much different, so much stronger, so much energy. The fat is important, but also the protein. Let's go to the next one. This is very controversial. Eating too much pork and too much chicken. Why might that be holding somebody back?
So pork and chicken are primarily composed of polyunsaturated fat, which I would say most people in America are getting too much of these PUFAs. Okay. It doesn't mean that they're bad, but they can be inflammatory. And I want to be very careful with how I say this because I understand that, you know, bacon and pork and chicken are not going to kill you. They're not going to hurt you, but some people may be way more sensitive to them. If they're already coming from a background of inflammation, too much polyunsaturated fat, or not enough of the right types of fats. Like for me, I was keto for a long time. I was eating a ton of nuts. I wasn't getting a lot of saturated fat actually on the keto diet I did before. And so that was really important for me to emphasize those saturated fats, which are more readily used by the body. Polyunsaturated fats are not as easy to use. So if you're trying to run on fat for fuel, saturated fat is going to be the best fuel source. And that's going to come from your ruminant animals like beef, lamb, bison. Pork and chicken, mostly polyunsaturated fat. So I've worked with at least a couple handfuls of people who are hitting a weight loss stall and they're eating bacon, 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 chicken breast, chicken wings. And once we start incorporating more fat from lamb and maybe cutting the pork back to 3 times a week or just have it on the weekends, their weight loss picks right back up. So I know this is not just my experience. It's a lot of people I work with. I'm not demonizing bacon, but I do think that there are better sources of fat.
I agree. I am thinking about people that listen to other, very well-known carnivore doctors like Dr. Berry and Dr. Chafee. More Dr. Berry would say, triple bean eat as much as you want, beef, butter, bacon, and eggs. And a lot of people are hearing that. And we agree with that. There's nothing wrong with bacon. There's nothing wrong with chicken, just the quantity of it. So for people that might be thinking, well, Dr. Berry says that, why are you saying something different?
Yeah. I mean, I've had this conversation with Dr. Berry standing in front of me. He was at my retreat and he stated, eat as much bacon as you like. And I paused. I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to be affirmed because this is what I teach my clients. And I want to learn something here. And I respect Dr. Berry. I mean, I look up to him and I still do, even if we have a differing suggestions sometimes. So I asked him, is it not true that saturated fat is more readily used than polyunsaturated? He agreed. He said, well, yes, it is. And then we moved on. And so this is just the fine line. Are you someone who has severe metabolic syndrome and all you need to do is cut out the standard American diet and move to, lower insulin? Because that's the trick for so many people. And I think Ken Berry does a great job at speaking to the masses. They have such a large audience that he doesn't want to create fear mongering. He doesn't want to say fear bacon. I think he's very wise for that. But my niche is people who have tried everything already and they're still sick. My niche is the people who are hitting a plateau and they've already done all the things and they're frustrated because Dr. Berry's advice isn't working. And so it doesn't mean Dr. Berry, gave you bad advice. It just means that you might need to go a step further and it might be a little more bio-individual. And so that's where I would recommend, let's try some more saturated fat. Let's use stearic acid, which is amazing for your mitochondria. That could be a superfood. So yeah, it depends on the individual.
Absolutely. I want to talk about chicken next. Chicken wings. Do you recommend chicken wings?
No. I mean, if someone's craving them, if my client says, hey, I know you said not a lot of chicken, but I want chicken wings, then I'll say, go get the chicken wings, enjoy your life. I'm not going to starve you from chicken and pork, but don't eat them every day. So I don't personally like chicken wings. I don't feel that my scratch is itched anytime I eat chicken. I'm not satiated ever. Even if it sounds so delicious, I'm like so bummed out. So it's like, I'm still hungry. Like this has not satisfied me. So I personally rarely eat chicken. Unless I'm making the pork panko breaded chicken nuggets for just something fun, but I haven't done that in, half a year.
Even for me, if I eat chicken, I don't feel that great. And I was looking into why, and I actually found a study that showed that since 1944, chicken was actually fed an arsenic-containing drug. It's an organic arsenic. And basically what they were trying to do was to make the chicken more a pink color and promote growth in the chicken. And then the FDA was actually sued in 2015, and then they stopped that. So that drug was called roxasone. But then it just makes you wonder what else they're putting into pigs and chicken. I think that's very important. Again, it's not fear-mongering. It's not saying that you can never eat chicken, you can never eat pigs or pork. It's to understand that what the animal ate is going to affect humans. The other very important thing is that humans have a monogastric system, one stomach. So do chicken and pigs. Can you explain the difference between monogastric animals and multigastric animals that we see in ruminant animals?
Yeah, so the ruminant animals contain fermentation chambers. They eat the vegetables and the plants and they assimilate nutrients from them. And then we eat them and we get those nutrients, whereas chickens and pigs do not have that ability. And so you explained it perfectly. We're not getting, I don't think it's as nutrient dense. If you look at the amino acid profiles, there are differences in those as well. But number one, the diet that the animal ate makes a big difference. And so I definitely, if I'm going to eat chicken, I'm going to be really picky about it. And I still won't be super satiated, but at least I'll feel better about it. I've also heard that, chickens carry candida very frequently. And I do believe that they can pass that to humans. And so if I have a client who has been battling candida for 8 years, I'm going to recommend maybe stay away from the chicken just to be safe. I don't know how much science is behind that, but I do definitely see I can connect the dots with many clients where removing chicken was very beneficial for that reason as well.
Conversely, I'd like to know if people are eating chicken and bacon and they feel great, leave it in the comments because this is about discussion and conversation and it helps each other to understand what is working for people and what's not working for people because carnivore, it's not an N=1 experiment. We all have to be bio-individual. So the next one that we'd like to get into is thing number 5 that people might need to fix, too much rendered fat.
Yeah. So if you've ever run to the bathroom or if you can't trust your farts, then you're probably eating too much rendered fat. And it sneaks its way into many of our foods on carnivore. So if you're making homemade broth, that liquid oil floating around, that's rendered fat, and that will run through you much quicker than the fat that's connected to a piece of meat that you're eating. And rendered is technically the process of rendering, I believe, is just cooking down. But there are levels of rendered. Is it liquid or is it just slightly cooked? The more liquid that it is, the more likely it is to give you diarrhea, heart palpitations, nausea, even anxiety. It's hard on your system. It's like pouring water into a Brita filter without a filter. It's just going straight through you. Your liver doesn't have a chance to produce enough bile to break it down, basically. And that can cause a lot of issues. And so people are maybe pouring the grease back over their ground beef after cooking it, or you put a bunch of butter on your steak and then it melts and you are basically drinking butter. These fatty lattes are full of rendered fat. So I'm not against them. But again, if you're having diarrhea issues, I would definitely be careful of the rendered fat.
I wanted to also ask about the heart palpitations. I've also heard that a lot, and people think, oh my God, why is that happening? Is that just the rendered fat? Could that be something else causing heart palpitations?
Yes, that could also be histamine intolerance. So common histamine intolerant symptoms are going to be runny nose, heart palpitations, skin rash, anxiety. Could be one or the other. It does definitely happen with the rendered fat, I think, just because it's such a demand on your system and it is stressful for the body. But a histamine response will be very similar in that way.
I also was researching this, and I understood that the digestive system has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system. So, especially when you're having rendered fat, it has a larger surface area. Imagine how big it is versus solid fat. So, especially when you're having the rendered fat, you drink that, and then your nervous system, it's too much, and it sends a signal to your brain. That's why you feel nauseous.
That's correct. Yeah, you said that really well. You should make a video just on that.
I think that is very important to understand why the rendered fat might be affecting people as well, because we do have those nerves in our digestive system. So if it's too much fat, that's why you can be feeling sick. So even graduating to eating more fat takes time. I wouldn't overnight just eat lots of fat. I wouldn't overnight just bump up your salt. These things, these tips that we're talking about needs to be happening gradually, like the transition to carnivore.
Yeah, I would almost say that again, just the same way, because people don't want to listen. So it is important to get maybe more electrolytes, maybe more fat will be your breakthrough. But if you try to do it overnight, I think you're very likely to hit a wall. So please take your time. Please increase slowly. The body loves to adapt, and that'll happen if you go slowly. I think so many people are in a hurry to feel better, and I understand that, but you don't want to hit a wall and have to wait because you ate too much fat. I get texts from clients, we start on one day and then the next morning they're like, I'm having diarrhea, I'm having heart palpitations. And it's like, I said to go slowly. I already know what they did. They tried to eat a stick of butter. And it doesn't work for everyone. So definitely go slow is the key.
Okay, let's get to thing number 6, which is high histamines from eating lots of ground beef and canned sardines.
Yes. Okay. So histamine intolerance is really common, I think. And especially when you go on an all meat diet or mostly meat diet, protein that ages increases histamine. Basically, it's a source of histamine, and so a lot of people run into histamine intolerance for the first time ever when they embark on a carnivore diet. That doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean your body is becoming fragile. It means that you're getting a higher histamine load than you were previously. Histamine intolerance occurs when there's a buildup. Histamine is not the bad guy. It's responsible for so many beneficial things in the body. That's a talk for another day. But the intolerance occurs when there's a buildup. And so higher histamine foods are going to be your ground meats. That grinding process increases histamine. Typically, ground beef is ground 3 times through before it's delivered to you. So there are some coarse grinds where they only grind it once. That could be more tolerable for someone. But you also want to think about the animal. A cow is typically higher histamine than a lamb because it takes much longer to process a 1,500-pound cow. And so non-aged meat could be really helpful for someone who's dealing with histamine intolerance. Anything in a can is going to be higher histamine. Anything that's fermented, so your sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, those are going to be higher histamine. I think a lot of people, and this was my story, I tried carnivore 8 times and I felt worse each time because of histamine intolerance. I didn't know what histamine intolerance was until I discovered Billy Doe meats, which was non-aged meat, and I was like, I can do this. What's the difference? It's non-aged. That I discovered. Histamine was just tearing me down in my mood, in my symptoms. I just had horrible flare-ups. So that's going to be really important for anyone with histamine intolerance, but especially anyone with MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome. You're going to want to look for the smaller animals and the lower histamine cuts.
So can you explain what histamine intolerance is? What is a histamine? So for people might think, do I have that? I'm scared. Please don't feel overwhelmed. Please don't feel overwhelmed. Let's backtrack. What is histamine?
Histamine is a chemical that's released by your immune system. Basically, it's a neuromodulator. It supports your neurotransmitters like dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine. It plays a role in your stomach acid secretion, so digestion. It plays a role in your immune cells. We have 4 different types of histamine receptors in the body, and they're located in different areas. So like I said, they play huge key roles in the body. Histamine is not the bad guy. Intolerance occurs when there is a histamine buildup. So it's just that your bucket is full and we need to detox. And sometimes people on this healing journey already have poor detoxification. That's part of the healing process. And so you might get quicker histamine buildup than someone else. This is why I no longer struggle with it, whereas before I was so sensitive. So it does get better as you heal and seal the gut and just support your detoxification pathways. But you want to look out for the higher histamine foods. Other things that can help with that journey are going to be natural antihistamines like the DAO enzyme. That's diamine oxidase. It helps to process histamine. Or vitamin C is an antihistamine. You might want to be careful if you have severe oxalate toxicity. A certain amount of vitamin C can convert to oxalate. Vitamin B6 helps with antihistamine. And then copper. Copper deficiency can cause histamine intolerance. So all of those can help you along the way. I think the DAO enzyme is the most popular and very easy to use. You could consume kidney or sweetbreads. They contain the DAO enzyme. And so just using those during your healing journey can help to offset those symptoms. But for people who have more intolerance, you might want to be more careful. Like I was, find some non-aged meat, focus on more lamb, etc.
So with the ground beef, because I eat a lot of ground beef, I was just thinking, well, what do I need to be doing? It's very important to get fresh meat, as fresh as possible, because the thing is when I don't want to say animal is slaughtered, but when you have the meat, you don't know how long it takes from the farm to the grocery store or your supermarket or even your farmer's market to grinding the meat, pre-packaging it, and then you eating it. So you want to shorten that process. And that's why if it is left out for too long, if you have that process too long, what happens is bacteria can form on the surface area of the meat, and that can cause an increase in histamines, and you can have a reaction. I didn't know this. And then I realized this. I was like, oh, good tip. So you need to So for me, I go to the farmer's market, I freshly ground beef. I get freshly ground beef. So I'll say, I want this cut, this cut. They freshly grind it once. And then in a day or two, we eat, it's probably about, I would say 3 kilos, which is about 5 pounds of meat. And that's going to really help with the histamine or any reaction that you might have. It's the bacteria that can build up because there's larger surface area.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said.
Let's get to thing number, what is this one? 7. Too much dairy. This one, people are going to be like, what, Rebecca? Why are you saying that?
I know no one's going to like me.
No, they like you because you're giving so much great information. But dairy, come on, I'm doing everything that I need to.
Right. Yeah. Dairy can work for a lot of people, and it's what makes this way of eating sustainable. So when I share my story, I did eat just meat, lamb, salt, and water for 1 year. But prior to that 1 year, I allowed myself 2 months of including dairy and stevia because my number one goal at first was just to gain weight. And those 2 things helped me to gain weight. So dairy is very hyperpalatable. It might cause someone to eat more than they necessarily need to. It literally suppresses leptin, which is our satiety hormone, because it acts on our opioid receptors. So if someone is struggling to lose weight at a weight loss stall, I would, recommend removing dairy. I understand, though, that it is a good source of protein. It can be a good source of fat. But I will say that raw dairy is much better. So when dairy is not raw, they're removing an exosome, and exosomes basically tell our guts how to use it, how to benefit from it. So without that missing link, people get bloated, they get indigestion, and it's just not serving them. They all around might not feel well. And I don't believe it's an ideal fat source, especially if it's conventional dairy. I think that can really mess with hormones. If I eat a lot of conventional cheese, I'll get a pimple for sure. And, no regrets, but I expect it. So I just don't play around with cheese. Um, you can find raw cheese, if it's not legal in your state, you can order it from other companies or you can find it in pet stores. But in general, dairy, no matter what, whether it's raw or not, is going to be hyper palatable. So I think for that reason, it's not helping a lot of people.
If you're not getting the results that you want. So if you're doing carnivore and you're doing the stevia and you're doing the dairy for a few months and you're like, well, you know what, guys, I'm not getting the results I want. I want more healing. I expected more weight loss. This is where this tip can come in. So again, dairy is not bad. We love dairy. We both eat dairy. I have Greek yogurt from time to time. It's great. It's like ice cream. Oof. So it is really understanding, because I'm just forecasting people feeling bad about like, well, I should do this and omit everything. You don't have to do it. It's an N=1 experiment. It's to understand if it's working for you. Let's go to thing number 8, which is fasting too much.
Yeah. So fasting too much. I think a lot of people come into this space and they just go all in and they start doing cold water exposure and sauna and red light. And then they want to do fasting and, they want to do a 3-day fast. Well, if someone has hypothyroidism, I really don't think a 3-day fast is going to serve you. It really depends on the context. Some people are healing their adrenals. Intermittent fasting is different than extended fasting. So intermittent fasting is an example, 16 hours of fasting overnight and an 8-hour eating window during the day. I think that's beneficial for pretty much everyone. I did that even at 69 pounds. That's enough of a stress to be a good thing, a eustress, but extending that to 72 hours or even 48 hours for some people, that can raise your cortisol and adrenaline to a level that it is no longer serving you. And so if you're dealing with hypothyroidism or energy issues, fasting can help until it doesn't. And so I would just, I used to think of fasting as a tool for healing. Like I fasted when I was underweight to heal from autoimmune disease. But I found that when I went to go eat again, it was even more painful and I had even more digestive issues and it was setting me back in the long run. It just was not appropriate in that season. So I did much better with just intermittent fasting. That's a good stress, but not too much. Once you're more supported hormonally, your adrenals are supported, that's when I think getting into extended fasts is a better idea. And you can continue healing, but there are other means to achieve autophagy. You don't have to fast for 72 hours. You could exercise and do a low carb diet. And so I just think that fasting has blown up. And for a lot of people, it hasn't been helpful. I have worked with a lot of people who ended up with a binge eating disorder because they got into this extreme fasting on the carnivore diet. And it's very unfortunate to see. It's just not appropriate for every season. Again, not trying to scare anyone from trying it. Like when you're fat adapted, you're stable, I encourage you to. It's great. It's powerful, but it's not appropriate for every season.
Why is fasting not appropriate for people with thyroid issues?
The hypothyroidism in general, the summary to me is, okay, your body doesn't feel safe. Your body is not getting enough. Your body is not properly supported, which is why your thyroid has downregulated, or it's caused by Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease. Either way, stressing your body out too much is going to push it in the wrong direction. And so the approach always with hypothyroidism is going to be, we need to increase overall consumption and increase your fat and decrease any extended fasting.
Okay, let's get to thing number 9, which is a funny one, not buying an air fryer or a pressure cooker and then complaining about the food prep. So can you elaborate on what does that mean?
Yeah, it's funny that you included that because it's true. I hear it. People are like, okay, I don't have time to be cooking, or their excuse for buying junk food and, fast food chains is like, well, it's just convenient. It takes longer to sit in the McDonald's line than to cut open a package of frozen meat and put it in the air fryer and press a button. It takes longer and it's more expensive usually now these days. So the way that I cook is in my air fryer from frozen. And I did that for all of my healing journey. Everything was cooked from frozen to reduce histamine, but that also makes it more convenient. There's no prep. You put it either in the air fryer or your pressure cooker and you press a button and then it's ready for you. So you don't have to clean many dishes. You don't have to clean your stovetop from the grease splatter, and you don't have to overthink anything. It is so simple and efficient. So air fryers are just mini convection ovens. Your food cooks super evenly and it's convenient. I will say, look out for a stainless steel air fryer. A lot of them have toxic coating on them. But in general, it's going to save you a lot of time. And I think that people are intimidated by their air fryers and pressure cookers. I hear all the time, I bought one 2 years ago, but it's still in the box. It's not intimidating. The only thing that's intimidating is that you haven't done it yet. So there's a learning curve to everything, but it's really not difficult to do. If you can text me on your phone about how you're intimidated, then I'm sure you can learn how to function in air fryer.
How do you cook a great steak in the air fryer?
From frozen at 400 degrees, and then I just do it for 8 minutes until it's ready. Keep flipping every 8 minutes. But if you cook it at a high temp from frozen, it will create a sear on the outside, which locks in the juices on the inside. So I think most of us here like medium rare to rare, and that's a perfect way to do it.
I think another thing that affects people's results is, again, with like the air fryer, it's more the cooking, but eating out. Do you think that affects their results?
Definitely. Oh, yeah. We can only control so much. Even if you communicate 3 times that you don't like seed oils, a lot of people don't know what seed oils are. You have to spell it out and say vegetable oil. But also, you don't know what's happening, when they're cooking your food. So I think that can throw a lot of people off. And I think that learning how to cook your own food is also really beneficial. Like for me, eating only meat helped me to become more grateful and just connected to my food. I know it sounds silly to say, but I felt more connected and grateful because I saw, okay, this animal was slaughtered. It lived a happy and healthy life, and now it is nourishing me so I can live a happy and healthy life. And there was no waste, and it was just a pleasure to go through that process. Whereas if I'm just ordering it, through a speaker and then being served food, I never get to experience that gratitude. So I think it's just much healthier to actually be involved in the preparing of your food.
It's a very holistic process. Let's get to the last one, which is not setting boundaries and non-negotiables. Laura Spath says this as well. Very important.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly what she says about it, but for me, I think that it's risky to go into the holidays and say, yeah, I'll just eat the low carb foods and I'll be fine. That's a great plan, and I hope it works out for you. But once you're surrounded by your friends who are eating cakes and cookies and all the things, you're going to feel more pressure and you're going to have more temptation. So I think it's actually healthy to allow yourself to draw outside the lines on certain occasions. For most people, I think that's healthy, but setting firm boundaries and saying, I will not do this. My non-negotiable is seed oils. I will not consume seed oils. I will not consume vegetable oil, canola oil. I have no interest. There's nothing that could tempt me enough to consume canola oil because I know the effects on my body. So everyone needs to set those boundaries. In the beginning of my healing journey, I had to say, I will not consume keto ice cream. I will not consume this or that because I was more sensitive and I needed to do that for myself. Now I allow many other things, but I still don't allow seed oils. So your boundary is going to change with the seasons, but that allows you some wiggle room, because I think if people just go into an experience thinking, okay, I'm going to be perfect. Well, we're not perfect. We're imperfect humans and we make mistakes. So setting some firm boundaries that you can respect would be a more helpful approach. That way you don't end up with regret, beating yourself up, trying to fast to undo your mistakes. Just give yourself some wiggle room. Olive oil and avocado oil are seed oils. Those ones I think are way less inflammatory than canola oil. So technically speaking, they are seed oils, but I don't think they're bad per se. I think that too much of them can be a problem. So olive oil is about 30% linoleic acid. And so for a certain individual, that could be too much. I don't consume olive oil. I am not against consuming some of those Siete chips made in avocado oil. Definitely had a bag of those when I was pregnant. But in general, I do still think that the saturated animal fats are going to take you the furthest.
So within those boundaries that people might set, it could just be saturated fats, beef, bacon, butter, just having those strict carnivore rules because you want to get the benefits of carnivore without being too loose, especially at the beginning.
Right. Yeah, definitely. But again, if you're going to a wedding or, a holiday party, don't be too strict because I think that can be triggering for some people. And if you set yourself up to be perfect and then you fail, a lot of times the instant reaction to that, almost impulsively, is to just throw everything out the window because you couldn't be perfect. And so I think in general, yeah, set those carnivore rules. What works for you bio individually? But there can be some occasions where you allow yourself to draw outside the lines. So, maybe you make the keto treat, whereas on a regular basis, you're not doing that because it's not serving you. I do believe in balance in that way, but I never balance poisons. We never need seed oils, period.
Absolutely. And I think that many people, you have to plan things in life. So even plan to be carnivore, but plan if you want to go out and enjoy yourself, what you might be eating, how much you might be eating, and your plan to get back onto carnivore. You do have to plan things like planning a wedding. It's not going to happen by itself. You're not going to stay on carnivore by itself. So you have to plan every step. So I just want to say a big thank you for giving so much valuable information. I think everyone watching is going to think, okay, maybe this, and this I need to change to get even better results. If people want to find you more, where can they find you, Rebecca?
So I'm on Instagram at Tailored Keto Health. My website is tailoredketo.health. Same for Facebook and YouTube. So you can find me there. And I just wanted to thank you again, Rena. I love our conversations. I love how involved you are in these interviews. It's so much more enjoyable to just, instead of just talking the whole time, I love hearing you speak and converse. I really appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Now you need to watch this video next with Laura Spath. She'll talk about how she did carnivore wrong and the easy fixes that she made to get the best carnivore results. I'll see you guys next week.